I'm like legitimately a little bit nervous, and I wasn't last
I think
time.
it's because I'm tired right this second. I feel like I'm gonna have trouble finding my words.
And in a lot of friends group,
1 second, let me just catch my train of thought.
holy means set apart, and spirit, I guess that wouldn't matter. Spirit means wind. After this question, we should pray to loosen up.
I just said something.
No, that was really good.
I pray that the Holy Spirit would just take over our tongues.
Pod on a Thursday.
Wednesday.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Righteous Podcast. It is so good to be back with you guys and be introducing a new topic. I love doing this stuff. It's our second podcast, but it feels amazing just to sit in this chair and have something to talk to you guys about because I love to talk and I need to get my thoughts out. Today, we are going to be talking about camp. David is actually leaving for camp in Monday, which is, what is it, Thursday?
Yeah, it's like just a few days away.
And then I leave for camp
the week right after, like as soon as we get back. That's actually, so we're filming this podcast. What day is it? Wednesday? 2 days after we filmed our first podcast because we wanted to put out a good podcast, but we're at camp. You know what I'm saying?
We're making sure that we're putting in that overtime for you guys because we want to make sure that we're putting out a video every Monday at 1 p.m. and we want to really push that agenda just to be consistent and to give you guys something to watch every Monday, just a little bit of encouragement. So on a Thursday, pod on a Thursday.
Wednesday.
No! I feel like it's only appropriate, Mr. House, to have some questions about camp, considering we're about to leave. The first question is, how should we approach camp as a leader?
Going into camp as a leader, it's such a weird thing because a lot of us, me and you especially, grew up going to camp as a camper. So when you make that transition and now all of a sudden you're serving and you're seeing camp from a different perspective, and you're seeing, where you once were, showing up to these camps, here to have fun. But now you're here still to have fun, but it's such a different perspective because you're there now to serve the students in the place that you once were, which is super cool because you have this outward perspective that you just didn't have when you were a student. And that's something I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, especially just leading in youth and at camps and just doing all these different camps. It's just not really about me. It's like all of the camps that I've been to, I was there to have fun. I was there to hang out with my friends. But when you go into a camp as a leader, you have to really set aside how you feel and what you want. And, being tired or just not really, all the different emotions that we might feel at camp as a leader, we just have to set those aside and really think about the campers, which is so cool to do because that really just equips us for life as a Christian in general, is just laying down yourself for other people.
I think that's good because for me, this is my first year being a leader, and I've only really been to one camp as a leader, and you were there. And you've been to multiple camps as a leader and understand that position more. So I think it's cool that you're talking about sacrificing really your wants and desires,
just how you feel.
And how you feel. And making that transition from camper to leader is definitely different because camper, you're all excited about being there with your friends and what you get to do with people and all the games and all this, all the cool stuff. But when you're a leader, you kind of just got to go with the flow and move with the Spirit.
You're right.
Because the Spirit is going to move and going to lead you differently than when you were a camper. And for me, it being my first year, I had to really pay attention. And a lot of times you'll question yourself, is that really the Spirit telling me to go talk to this kid? Should I really pray with this person? Would it be weird? And I want to get to the point where I'm just dialed and I can really listen to the Spirit. But the only way to do that is through prayer and understanding and knowing what God's voice sounds like.
You have a role as a leader to, obviously pour into them and be there for them, but you're also there to make sure they have fun. So it's you can't sit there and play every game with them at camp, but you still have to make sure that they're enjoying that time. And then when it comes down to it, you got to be serious when you're tired from trying to make sure they have fun all day.
Mm.
So it's like a very exhausting feeling, but it does teach you how to rely on the Holy Spirit and listen. Really, I guess just kind of look inward and listen more to what the Holy Spirit is trying to say through you when you're just tired, dude.
I would say like the number one mindset going into it is none of this is about me. Whether it's for the kids or for God, none of it is really about you. And that sounds like you're putting yourself down, but really it fills you up and makes you so excited to serve other people. And I know I was really trying to have that mindset going into North Georgia camp, and it made me just so ecstatic to be there. Like I was so excited to see how God was going to use me because I was available to be used. If I was just concerned about me or how I was going to sleep or is it going to be weird, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be moved by God because I wasn't available. But because of being open, I definitely noticed how God moved and moved and moved, and it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, whenever I'm at home, I know you probably feel this way too. Like everything, I mean, I know as Christians, it's like I'm not trying to always make everything about me, but it's very easy to do that when you're at home because it's like, you have work, you have, school, whatever you got going on. Everything that you're doing is really your thing. So it's like your mind is kind of consumed on what you got going on most of the time. Going into camp, it's like a complete shift. For a second, it's like, okay, if you're tired going into work, you're a little bit worried. But if you're tired going into camp, you shouldn't be worried because it forces you to rely on the Holy Spirit, you know what I'm saying?
That's good.
Which, I mean, obviously we could probably still be used by the Holy Spirit at work, but it's a lot harder to do that. You're not really in the frame of mind to do that at work.
Because you're
Even
comfortable.
though we should. But that's why it teaches us. That's why I'm saying is it does equip you to go back home and learn how to do that so you can go back home and actually implement it. Okay, so the last point of going into camp as a leader I wanted to discuss was just prayer, honestly.
It's good.
Something that has been super pivotal for me going into camp and just really being able to pour into these students and give it my all was getting on my knees before camp and genuinely praying as if I already know what's going to happen. And not even like praying from my perspective of what I think is going to happen, but asking God what he wants me to pray about for these kids. And that's something obviously we've done. And it's such a cool thing to do because a lot of times if you just sit in silence and ask God what he wants you to pray about camp and about these kids, he will tell you. And based on that, you can go into your prayer, you can pray specifically about that. And a lot of the things you are told, you go into this camp and you experience. So it's almost like little miniature personal prophecies, which we've talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a weird way to describe it, but that's actually how it feels.
But with doing those things, we have some of the most crazy experiences and crazy stories that are 100% out of this world from God. Like there's no room, and David knows, like there's no room to say, oh, this is a coincidence. Like we know for a fact it's from God, and it's because we listen to him.
All right, now that we've talked a little bit about going into camp as a leader, we're going to talk about going into camp as a student now, which is obviously a lot different. But we've had that perspective. We've kind of gone through that. So I think there's a lot of takeaways that probably me and you both have of just like how I wish I would have gone into camp as a student and really what I would recommend to anyone going into camp as a student at this point. So we could talk a little bit about that. What are your first initial thoughts?
I literally went to camp as a student like a year ago, so I'm like fresh out, if you know what I mean. like I just
Fresh out.
Yeah, I'm fresh out, dude. I feel like it's so easy to get distracted going into camp as a student, and I feel like most of the time I was. I feel like the devil definitely tries to use that because there are so many people around you, and most of them are distracted too. So I feel like the way to combat that is through prayer. And that's something I wish I did before going into camp as a student was praying about camp and what God needed to show me. And most of the time I was going into camp, it didn't matter if I prayed about it or not. God was finna rock me with something as a student every single time. And it would hit deep. And I would say one thing that you should pray for before you go into camp, even if you don't know exactly what to pray for as a student, is just pray for your heart to be open. Because God is going to speak to you while you're at camp. There's going to be a time where God is knocking on your heart and He's going to be calling you to do something, whether it's to pray with somebody, to open up and be vulnerable, or to get baptized. I mean, whatever it is, there's going to be a moment where He is calling you to do something, and you have to be prepared to do it and open to do it. So I would say praying for openness of your heart, and that is something I wish I did more often because I feel like I would have listened to God a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many experiences for me at camp when I was a student where I felt God knocking, I felt God telling me what to do, and I just didn't listen, dude. Like, and I regretted it, and I wish. I mean, it's not that I regret it now because I see how God's used it, but I feel like I would have experienced God a lot more in high school, and I would have really just grown to understand His love a lot more in high school if I would have just listened to those knocks that you're talking about. But the thing is camp is so temporary, and if you can just give yourself 1 week to just be there and just experience God and just tell yourself that I am going to experience God, I'm going to encounter God for just this 1 week. Like, I just want to be here to hear from God, and that's my intention. Like, if I would have gone into camp that way as a kid, I just really do feel like I would have had so many more experiences too that would have compounded and made me think a lot different, coming out of high school.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have fun at camp. Like, camp is designed to be fun, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't hang out with your friends or just ditch your friends, get on your knees and pray like a monk for a week straight. That is not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying and what I'm asking is just for you to be open. Being open is simple. It's just expecting God to say something, to use you in some sort of way. And if you're not sure about that, just pray about it. Ask God to make you open. That could be the most simple prayer, but the biggest life-changing prayer of your entire life, especially going into camp, because God is all over the place. So go and have fun, have a great time at camp, and just be ready for God to knock on your heart. That's the best advice I could give. So for our last question, why do we feel compelled to use this approach? So when we're thinking about the approaches as a leader and the approaches as a camper and how we should prepare going into camp and going into that moment, like what makes us compelled to use these strategies?
Yeah. So first, with the leadership strategy, I guess, that we kind of use now is I feel like it's just really just being a little more intentional, being a little bit more prepared for camp and understanding that it's not you that's going to be used, it's God that's going to use you. So I feel like going in and just go ahead, like before camp, just going ahead and setting that intention, spending time in prayer and really sitting in that before you even get there. It's just a lot better than coming in unprepared, which I used to do. And I'm not saying I wasn't used, but I just feel like it's a lot. My reason for kind of switching it up and spending more time in prayer is because I wanted to be more intentional about it and I wanted to be used more, So that's kind of my reason for leadership. As far as, I guess, the approach for what I would recommend for students is because I don't think there was a single camp I went to in high school that I fully took serious. Like, I honestly feel like every single camp, like, I went every year to camp, CIY, North Georgia. And I feel like every year at CIY, I went with the same group of guys, and it was like we would all be super, like, we were all super tight. And, like, we would show up super, like, not ready for camp at all. And we would show up. We knew we were about to get rocked.
Right.
But we were just there to have fun, hang out with our friends. And we would play all the games. We would never, like, take it serious. And then, like, last night, they'd be like, does anybody want to rededicate their life to Christ? And we'd be like, me. And I would, like, they would, like, tell us to keep our eyes closed. And I would, like, have my hand up and I would look up. Like, everybody would be peeping at each other. Like, I would look and all of my friends were like, me, I want to rededicate my life.
Dude,
and that would happen, like, every year. We would rededicate our life. Like, we just didn't know. We would just bring so much guilt and shame into camp and then just crack every time. So it was just like,
that is hilarious.
There's just, with being a student, like, I feel like my understanding was probably different than some people. But, yeah, everything we talked about, how we wish we would have, that would have just changed a lot. Like it would have just, I wouldn't have felt that way if I would have just been talking to my leaders and actually had conversations. I wouldn't doubt my salvation.
Every
So,
camp.
yeah, every single camp.
Yeah, dude, I get
So,
it. I would say the reason it's important to use those strategies is because it's like we talked a lot about prayer, and that's just like one-on-one. I mean, with the man who knows what's going to happen, right? Like God of the universe, past, present, future, knows exactly what's going to happen. And that's the thing is like me and David got on our knees and we're praying for camp, and God's telling us stuff like that junk happened. Like it happened. And it's because he knew. He knew exactly what those kids needed. He knew exactly what we needed to be prepared and exactly what we needed to hear to be
ready.
And exactly what we needed to hear to be confident and to take a good approach at it. I feel like prayer would be the most important thing for a leader, and intentionality, like taking serious time to pray, like not just, and of course praying throughout your day, but not that alone. Like seriously, like try getting on your knees. It changes lives. Try setting a timer and listening to God, and you will see crazy results and you will be hooked instantly. As far as for a camper's approach, like I would say that I always wanted to go to camp and experience God. And it's not that I was never taking it serious, because I feel like I would, but there would be so much distraction around me that I would fall into. And there's nothing wrong with being with my friends, but dude, literally like we went to beach camp and we were in this room. It was room 211. Like it's iconic. Like people know this room. And it's because for 2 years in a row, we put up LED strips, and I'll put it on the screen. We put up LED strips, like flags, like man cave flags, and then we're bumping music the whole time. So everybody, like there were like 25, 30 dudes in our room at like 12 p.m. And I'm not saying any of that is bad. Like I wouldn't trade those times for the world, but you do have to be careful with that boundary, because you can get so sucked in to distraction versus being open to how God will work in you.
It's good to be fun and like, you know, if you want to bump music, whatever. But like, I feel like too much of that, if it gets to a point where like you notice a whole crowd of your friends is just like never going to be serious about anything, and you kind of can see it going in that direction, that you just need to sort of like step away from some situations. Like let them know that you still are there to grow. And, you know, I mean, that's pretty much all I would say on that.
And it's one of the hardest things to say that to one of your friends. And I'm not very good at it, to be honest. Like when I see one of my friends not taking something serious, it's hard for me to be that guy that's like, oh, we should chill,
Yeah.
So be an example. I mean, lead by your actions instead of just your words, because when you lead by your actions and follow them up with your words, you don't just have to look at your friend and be like, hey man, that's not cool. Like, hey, we should try and take it serious. When you're leading by your actions, it's just in like a loving way, and they will see that and follow it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that example is the best. That's the best way to do it. I feel like to this day, like I still, to this day, like with the people that I do want to, I would like to influence more with some of the friends that have influenced me in the past. It's like, I mean, I still could not just go up to them and tell them like, yeah, that's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
But like they have noticed change in me, and that's been the biggest thing, dude. It's just kind of stepping away, like just stepping away and just sort of living like in a way that where they could see change in you. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like don't step away and do the same things away, but step away and try to really just grow, and they'll see that in you. So
I think especially what they'll see is that you have like your own relationship with God, and it's yours. And in a lot of friend groups, they have a shared relationship with God. Whatever the friend group thinks God is and Jesus is, that's what Jesus is. That's what God is. And none of them and I can fall in this too, like when you and Mitch are gone, like it's harder for me. Like I'm not just getting on my knees and praying for camp, even though I should. I feel like a lot of times it's easy to have that shared relationship instead of that personal relationship. And then when you step out and have that personal relationship, there is change in you, and your friends see that, and they're wondering what's going on because they're all the same, but you're set apart and different. Wrapping up these 3 questions, leaders, dive deep into prayer and see it more as an opportunity instead of an obligation to go to a camp and lead these kids. Know it's not about you, and know that God is going to use you, and do not get distraught. Let God work and be patient at camp. Kids are going to be changed, and you're going to watch it happen, and you're going to be a part of it too. So just be ready for it.
And students, I mean, be prayed up, ready to have your heart open going into camp. I mean, just have fun, but just try not to get too distracted, and honestly, just be open to what God could do in your life. I mean, seriously.
Through these things and like the stories that we've said, we just feel like this is the most concrete way to go about it, really through prayer and just attempting to be open. I mean, it's a process, but you'll really see results, and that's when faith is built and faith grows. I'm really excited to see this happen in your guys' life and see how you guys change and benefit from maybe some stuff that we've said too, just our experience. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Righteous Podcast. We really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to watch it. I'm not going to lie, it's been pretty rough today, just with filming on Monday and then again on Wednesday. Like Tuesday, I spent all day editing, and now he's editing. Really trying to get this first video ready for you because we're both going to be out of town at camp, which is pretty cool because we're talking about camp. I know it wasn't the deepest conversation or over the deepest matter, but we really feel like being prepared for camp, and this is even helping us because we're about to leave for camp too. So we just felt compelled to share a little bit about it and our experiences with camp in the past, and we hope that you guys learn something and maybe can implement something that we've said. So we really appreciate you guys, and see you guys later.
Appreciate it.